and across Ukraine. Well, let's go live now to Odesa, where we're joined by Michael Basiukiu, a global affairs analyst and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Michael, always good to see you here on the program. Of course, Odesa was struck overnight as well.
Yes, it was. And in fact, we're just learning that one of the structures that were struck was a food warehouse of the Ukrainian Red Cross. Very, very intense fire there. Everything inside was destroyed. And then a bit earlier, a mobile field hospital also belonging to the Red Cross in Mykolaiv. Now, clearly these are not military targets, and yet Russia continues to pound them night after night. As your correspondent pointed out, these are happening at nighttime when people are very vulnerable. So it boggles the mind how many red lines have been crossed in this war so far, but it's making people very, very tired, very weary.
Yeah, Michael, has the Red Cross responded in any way?
Well, you know, they have to, as much as they can, remain neutral. What they said is that they require more funding, they require more protection. They have lost staff, not only in this phase of the war, but way back up until 2014. So it's been very, very harmful for humanitarian organizations, but also their ability to move around. So again, another red line that is a war crime targeting humanitarian workers, humanitarian organizations.
And Michael, there's a lot of talk about this spring offensive, and I've spoken to Ukrainian generals who have said, look, it's not like, a whistle is blown and then suddenly it's a spring offensive. This is all part of a strategy. But is the world, do you think, waiting for something massive to take place, a massive Ukrainian operation?
Well, in a word, there's no time to wait. Excuse me. I think what Ukraine needs right now, are a couple of things: the ability to close its own skies, and also longer range on those missiles to target legitimate military targets within Russia, the exact places where those missiles are coming from. Why is it, for example, Yalda, that the Russians are targeting Odesa port? Right next to me is the port where the Russians agreed to allow Ukraine to export food to the world.
That in itself, Michael, looks like it's in jeopardy.
It is in jeopardy, and if the Russians aren't capable of ruining that deal, if we can put it that way, the negotiating table, they would do it by targeting infrastructure. Look, there's one quick point here that needs to be made. No one should see this conflict as a local or regional conflict. It affects the world, and it will come to your doorstep sooner or later, whether that's by higher prices at the checkout counter, cyber warfare, hybrid warfare. It will come to you.
I mean, we're already seeing the war in Ukraine. I was speaking to the Bangladeshi Prime Minister yesterday, who was talking about the impact on food prices in Bangladesh. We're seeing this the world over as a result of this conflict.
Absolutely. I saw it just recently when I was in Canada. So I think the Russians need to be pushed back, for example, not only on the battlefield, but through more diplomatic and economic means. And that, for example, means tightening the noose on that dirty money, for example, being laundered in places like the United Kingdom. It involves, for example, getting the Gulf states on board to ban Russian visitors, Russian tourists, Russian investors from coming to places like Dubai. But it's going to take a lot of pressure from the West for that to happen.
And what about the feeling towards the West in general in Ukraine? Do they feel supported? I mean, obviously, the ammunition has been coming in for the last year, but I'm sure there are nerves in Kiev, especially about how Washington, for example, will respond if there is a change of government administration leadership there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is pressure on the Zelensky administration to go ahead with some sort of large spring offensive to show that all of that given military aid is being used. But there are still holes that need to be plugged. For example, Australia still is not part of the main battle tank coalition. They need to get on board to provide more tanks. And again, more air cover and more range on those missiles. I think that's the only way that Mr. Putin and his inner circle will be pushed back.
Michael, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme.
Pleasure.
Now let's go to Sudan, where